Please be seated. There is something very meaningful and at the same time humbling in the fact that the Liberal Judaism is older than every single person who is participating in this service. 120 years ago, on the 16th of February 1902, during a meeting attended by 70 people, the Religious Jewish Union was founded. Later, it became the Union of Liberal and Progressive Synagogues, and from 2002, Liberal Judaism. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you to the Liberal Jewish Synagogue for the service of the celebration of the 120th anniversary of the Liberal Judaism. Today we will remember and celebrate its past and learn its history. By doing so and by looking at all of its current leaders in person or online, today's service will also be an inspiration and celebration of the future of Liberal Judaism. We already made it ad 120, until 120. The next wish should be ad 240, until 240. I would like to welcome all of you who are present here in the sanctuary in person, and all of you who are participating online on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube, on a number of channels, and a special welcome to all guests who are not part of the liberal community or to a Jewish community even, and a special welcome to Jesuit young adult ministries and who are here with us in the sanctuary. And we will say it afterwards, but there will be an option to have a little tour and a Q&A session about Judaism afterwards. We conclude our service, not conclude, we continue our service. We're on the page 112 if you're following from the prayer books. And let's read together in English. Eternal God, a mystery surrounds my life. What came before it and what lies beyond it are shrouded in darkness. But in the darkness is your presence, and in the mystery your love. No mind can grasp the splendor of your being, no tongue express the majesty of your works. Yet there are times when we sense a reality that is beyond our mortal sight. May this Sabbath be such a time for us. Help us to hear your voice, to find your image in our souls, and to be at peace. Let's try to sing the first line together. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Together. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. The second part. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. My God, the soul you have given me is pure, for you have created and formed it and breathed it into me, and you sustain it within me. So long as there is a soul within me, I will give thanks to you, Eternal One, my God and God of my ancestors, sovereign of all worlds, guide of every human soul. We praise you, O God, in whose hands are the souls of all the living and the spirit of all the flesh. I would like to invite Rabbi Ariel Friedlander to continue the service.
Baruch Shema v'haya haolam, Baruch Hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamhulal b'fi amo, u'shubach u'mfo'ar b'lshon chasadav v'avadav. Bishfachot u'vizmirot נגדלך ונמליכך מלכנו יחיד חי העולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל בתשפחות. To you the stars of morning sing, from you their radiance bright did spring, and steadfast in their vigils day and night, your angels, flooded with fervor, ring your praise. They teach the holy ones to bring into your house the breath of early light. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ. כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שיר ושבחה, הלל וזמרה, ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בשירי זמרה.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל, המאיר לארץ ולדרים עליה ברחמים, ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. מה רבו מעשיך אדוני, כולם בחוכמה עשית, מלאה הארץ קנייניך, תתברך אדוני אלוהינו, על שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית, יפארוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות. We praise you, O God, creator of light. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Good and beautiful and true, sound, established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer. You were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly, you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
שירה חדשה, שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו.
Adonai, Sifatai Tifta, Ufiagite Hilata, Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imateinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El HaGadol, HaGibor, HaNorah, El Elyon, Gomel chasadim tovim, v'konei hakol, v'zocher chastei avot v'imahot. U'meilim lema'an shemo v'yahava, melech ozer u'moshia u'magi. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Bezrat Sarah, atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye metim atah rav lehoshia, Mashif haruach u'marid hageshem, Mazriach hashemesh u'marid hatah, Mechakel chaim bechesed, Mechaye metim berachamim rabim, Somek noflim v'rofei cholim, umatir asurim, umekayem emunato, Ishenei afar, mi chamocha, ba'agivurot. Uhumi domelach, melech meimitu mechaye, umatzliach Yeshua, v'ne'emanata lahachayot met. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye HaMetim. We praise you, O God, source of eternal life.
Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, B'Shem shemagdishim oto yishmeh marom, Hakatov ayad neviecha. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Meloch kol haaretz, Yodo, Yevodo, Malei olam, Baruch kavod Adonai, ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך כי מחכים אנחנו לך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהים ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts this message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good.
Shabbat. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amacha Yisrael, u'tefilatam ba'ahavat tekabel, u'tehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch ata Adonai, she'otecha levadecha vayira na'avod.
This morning, as we are gathered with so much for which we give thanks, let us read together the prayer on page 144. We give thanks that you, Eternal One, are our God as you were the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, ulecha na'eh lahodot. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael amecha. Barucheinu avinu kulanu kechad bo panecha, ki bo panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Torat Chaim v'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka uvracha v'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom v'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael v'et kol ha'amim B'chol heit u'b'chol shah b'shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom.
ושפתיי מדבר מרמה, ולמקללי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפלה כל תהיה אלוהי, אלוהי. אלוהי נאצול לשונים אליו, ושפתיי מדבר מרמה, ולמקללי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפלה כל תהיה אלוהי, אלוהי. אלוהי נאצול לשונים אליו, ושפתיי מדבר מרמה, ולמקללי נפשי תדום, ונפשי כעפלה כל תהיה אלוהי.
My task is to tell the birth of Liberal Judaism in 3 minutes. Well, maybe I'll put it in 3 acts of a drama. Act 1, the setting 120 years ago. Jews drifting away from Judaism, from synagogue membership and attendance, is declining everywhere. A result of emancipation and enlightenment, challenges to belief. A 19th century of dramatic intellectual changes, notable secular works, Darwin's Origins of the Species by Natural Selection, Wellhausen reinventing biblical criticism, already the birth of reforming Judaism in Germany going back to 1810, and it spread to Western Europe and America, more slowly in conservative England. Well, there was the West London Synagogue in 1840, but there were few radical changes. And also a century of industrialization, the need to work a 5.5 or 6-day week, no time for Shabbos morning service, no time to study. Act 2, the response. Experiments tried by United Synagogue reverends, Simeon Singer, starting Saturday afternoon services for girls and women in the East End, and also at the newly established Hampstead United Synagogue, a service with a mixed choir, and then also the Honourable Lily Montague with the children's services at the new West End Synagogue and her innovative West Central Club. Another response, Claude Montefiore, Israel Abrahams, and other leading lay people a drawing room club of intellectuals motivated to revive Judaism in Anglo-Jewry, and then Lily Montagu's challenging article appearing in 1899 in the intellectual journal Jewish Quarterly Review, founded by Montefiore and Abrahams, The Spiritual Possibilities of Judaism Today, she wrote. And this led to a gathering of leading lights, Orthodox reverends like A.A. Green and Simeon Singer, West London synagogues Maurice Joseph, and an array of influential lay people, men like Isidore Spielmann, women like Netta Franklin. They set the liberal Judaism ball rolling. Their mission, as stated in the advertisement for the first public gathering, and I quote, to provide means for deepening the religious spirit among the members of the Jewish community who are not in sympathy with the present synagogue services, who are unable to attend them. Existing synagogues ruled out the first meeting for the Jewish Religious Union, so it was held in the Great Central Hotel, now the posh Landmark Hotel, at 3:30 on Saturday afternoon, October the 18th, 1902, 120 years ago. Regular meetings continued until it was realized a dedicated synagogue building was needed, and so in 1910, the newly named congregation founded the first liberal Jewish synagogue in a converted chapel in Hill Street, just round the corner. The First World War intervened, but in 1920, a purpose-built grand synagogue was opened in St. John's Wood Road, and here we are today. The third act, a rabbi was needed, and Rabbi Dr. Israel Mattock was brought from the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati to become the founding rabbi and responsible for the rapid growth of this congregation. And he began, together with Lily Montagu and Claude Montefiore and others, to found other synagogues and to found a movement. Miss Lily brought to the JRU the need for spirituality and belief, Montefiore an intellectual approach, and Mattock added a third aspect, so essential to the culture of liberal Judaism, the need for social justice. So much developed in the first 25 years. Let's see where the story now takes us.
The period 1928 to 1945 can hardly be summarized in a few minutes. The Great Depression, the rise of fascism, a world war, the Shoah. The expansion of the liberal movement in those years was not only geographical, to Greater London and the regions, Liverpool, Birmingham, Brighton. It was in provision, including the unemployed and German Jewish refugees, a young John Rayner among them. One scene captured in Lawrence Riegel and Rosita Rosenberg's History of Liberal Judaism's First 100 Years has Rabbi Leslie Edgar witnessing a queue of men standing outside the local employment exchange in the rain and starting a club for them at the RJS. About 250 men joined. They could get a meal of hot soup, bread and cheese for 1 old penny. The following offers a vignette of wartime sacrifice involving a member of Ner Tamid, South London's famous youth club. Written during the war, it was recently rediscovered in the SLLS archive. No loss could possibly leave such a deep impression on the minds of all members of the Ner Tamid, past and present, than that of Jack Goldston. Officially, he will go down in the records as a young man who expended a great deal of energy in building up and consolidating the club, on whose committee he served in various capacities over a period of years. His personality and ever-present, highly developed sense of humour endeared him to us all. No request, no favour was ever asked, but that he did all in his power to fulfil it. 2 dates stand out particularly in my mind as I write this. The first is September the 3rd, 1939. We had arranged to play tennis in the afternoon, and not even Mr. Chamberlain's 11 o'clock broadcast deterred us. The atmosphere was, of course, a little strained. Much discussion took place on how long it would take us to polish them off. Every one of us became acutely aware that before long we should be called into the forces and be obliged to play a part. We solemnly shook hands all round and pledged ourselves to meet in a grand reunion when the war ended. That didn't mean that we saw no more of each other. We met frequently and took not only pleasure but courage in each other's company. Then, as the speed of the call-up increased, we learned with mixed feelings of pride and regret that Jack was to be the first to represent us in the army. No more inconsequential functions, no longer could we bury our heads in the sand. We began to appreciate what war really meant. It was with sadness in every heart that we bade him farewell and Godspeed. He joined the Royal Artillery and cut the same fine, handsome figure in uniform as he had always done in civis. After 2 years on home service, he was drafted overseas, and it was while engaged on active operations that he met his untimely end on the 26th of October 1942. We salute Jack Goldston. His memory will remain an inspiration to us all to fight even harder until the scourge of fascism is removed from the face of the earth.
The upheavals of the war meant that many Jews had interrupted or abandoned their previous religious practices. Services given to troops were liberal in style, and once troops were demobilized, many looked for similar style services, particularly attracted to prayers in English. After the war, both Reform and Liberal movements began a process of what Riegel and Rosenberg describe as empire building. Due to the rise in both Reform and Liberal synagogues in the post-war years, a gentleman's agreement was established to avoid competition between the two movements. Although the agreement was occasionally broken, good relations generally existed between the two movements. In the post-war years, the Union of Liberal and Progressive Synagogues planned to extend its congregations. In Rosita's words, the impetus to form new congregations mostly came from second and third generation liberal Jews who had moved out to new areas, with the catalyst being the religious education of their children. One female participant I interviewed for a research project on post-war suburban Judaism told me that her mother had not learnt Hebrew and was alone with her son during the war. Her mother subsequently became one of the founders of a liberal synagogue in London and was able to provide her 5-year-old son with a Jewish education there. Others I interviewed explained that they were attracted to liberal Judaism for a number of reasons, including the balance between English and Hebrew in services, and that men, women, and their children could sit together. Another participant said about Orthodox services, you know, on one hand, women are revered in the home and what they do, but you sit separately and you can't join the service. Thus, the inclusion of women by progressive Judaism rendered communal worship more appealing to women who had previously felt marginalized. However, the liberal movement also faced a number of challenges. In 1949, discussions about the validity of liberal Jewish marriages came to a head at a meeting of the Board of Deputies, when Chief Rabbi Brody argued that liberal Jewish marriages were contrary to Jewish law and threatened the fabric of Judaism and Anglo-Jewish life. The implication that liberal Jews were not regarded as professing the Jewish religion, yet could be representatives on the Board of Deputies, led the liberal delegates, led by Lady Hartog, to walk out of the meeting. And the ULPS advised synagogues not to elect representatives onto the board. Later in 1951, Jews were supported in seeking legislation from Parliament to appoint their own marriage secretaries for liberal congregations. In 1952, the ULPS celebrated its 50th anniversary with a number of services and events. The key event was a service led at the Liberal Jewish Synagogue, which was led by 16 ordained ministers and lay leaders across the country. Within 50 years, the congregations without premises who had met in a hotel had become a union of 16 communities, with several other communities added in the late 50s and early 60s.
The Hebrew name of West Central Liberal Synagogue was Mavakshe Emunah, the seekers of faith. The name encapsulated what was Miss Lily's main mission, I think, in life, to bring the knowledge of God to all and to use that knowledge of God, the acceptance of God as creator, to bolster her work for the poor and the vulnerable in the society. So I read from her sermon in 1928. You are present here as representing an organized religious community, but surely you feel with me that the relation of the individual soul to his God must always be in the foreground. The psalmist brought to us his message, as does the prophet and the priest. The relation between the universal man and his God is of such a holy nature that we do not often attempt to deal with it from the pulpit. And yet it is exactly this aspect of religion that is of supreme importance. And we have to consider how we will bring it home to ourselves and which way we want to demonstrate it to those for whom we are a leader. We, with all our limitations, our hopes, and our aims, seek to approach the perfect, infinite God.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's wonderful to be here at the LJS, as always, and an honor to participate in this very special service. So as we turn to the Torah service, I invite up to the Bima Julian Sampson, Philip Lyons, Rabbi Anna Wolfson, Rabbi Dr. Charles Middleborough, and Rabbi Dr. Renee Pfertzel. Haghel et ha'am, assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities, to hear and learn to revere the Eternal One, your God, and observe faithfully all the precepts of this Torah. And let their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere the Eternal One, your God.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Gadlul Adonai iti unaromama shemo yachtav. Please be seated. And I invite Rabbi Dr. Charles Middleborough to deliver the Devar Torah.
They say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And they certainly say that if you make a mess of something supremely important, you are unlikely to be given the opportunity to repair the damage, unless, of course, your name is Moses. I rather prefer the giving of the second set of tablets to the first. The first was the one with pyrotechnics, and it proved too combustible for the Israelites to handle. The second was more low-key, and the bonus was the 13 attributes of God, which were not previously shared. My favorite midrash about the first set of tablets is that the pieces were put in the ark with the second set and journeyed with the Israelites. Broken they might have been, but they still possessed a sanctity and value. It all feels immensely apposite today when we begin the celebration of 120 years of liberal Judaism. As the years of the Enlightenment passed by, it became clear to the great Jewish liberal thinkers of the age. As the years of the Enlightenment passed by, it became clear to the great Jewish liberal thinkers of the past that the second set of tablets, the stultified traditional Judaism of their parents and grandparents, was unfit for the modern world. So they took the brave and inspired step of going back to the broken tablets and fitting them together in a different way. They created something completely new, but rooted in the old and possessing an aura of its sanctity. Just as Israelite religion built on its foundation myths, so we have built on millennia of Jewish history and practice to create liberal Judaism, a Judaism in harmony with the modern world. But we did take something from the second set. We took the 13 attributes of God as a foundation text for our ethical monotheism, and we have held that line, using it as a springboard for some radical initiatives, of which our founders, once we'd explained it all to them, would have been proud. May the merciful, compassionate, and tolerant God bless the work of our hands. Amen.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה, פסול לך 2 לוחות אבנים כראשונים, וכתבתי על הלוחות את הדברים אשר היו על הלוחות הראשונים אשר שיברת. והיה נכון לבוקר, ועלית בבוקר אל הר סיני, וניצבת לי שם על ראש ההר, ואיש לא יעלה עמך, וגם איש אל ירא בכל ההר, גם הצאן והבקר אל יראו אל מול ההר ההוא. ויפסול 2 לוחות אבנים כראשונים, וישכם משה בבוקר, ויעל אל הר סיני, כאשר ציווה אדוני אותו, ויקח בידו 2 לוחות אבנים.
Sorry, I thought that you were doing another line.
So should we move on to inaugural now, for the next section of the Torah?
La ya'avor Adonai panav vayikra Adonai Adonai el rachum v'hanun el hapayim v'rav chesed ve'emet notzer chesed lalavim nosei avon v'avesha v'chada'ah v'nakeh lo yenakeh Poket avot, al banim val banei vanim, al shilashim val ribeim. Vaymahem Moshe, vayikot archa vayishtachavu, vayomer imna, מצאתי חן בעיניך אדוני, ילך נא אדוני בקרבנו, כי עם קשה עורף הוא, תסלחת, לעווננו חטאתנו ונחלתנו.
The Eternal One said to Moses, "Carve 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will inscribe upon the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you shattered. Be ready by morning, and in the morning come up to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. No one else shall come up with you, and no one else shall be seen anywhere on the mountain. Neither shall the flocks and the herds graze at the food of this mountain." So Moses carved 2 tablets of stone like the first, and early in the morning he went up on Mount Sinai as the Eternal One had commanded him, taking the 2 stone tablets with him. The Eternal One came down in a cloud and stood with him there, proclaiming the name Eternal One. The Eternal One passed before him and proclaimed, "Adonai, Adonai, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, yet not remitting all punishment, but visiting the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generations." Moses hastened to bow low to the ground in homage and said, "If I have gained your favor, O my Lord, pray, let my Lord go in our midst, even though this is a stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your own."
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Please be seated, everybody. Remember not to wear a slippery jacket next time I'm wearing a talit on the bima. So I now invite Paul Silvermeyer and Karen Newman to the Bima, and I invite Rabbi Tanya Sakhnovich to introduce the Haftarah.
The Haftarah reading for today is one of the most famous and memorable scenes in the Tanakh, depicting the contest between Elijah, the prophet of the Eternal One, and the 450 prophets of Baal at the top of Mount Carmel. As I only have a few more sentences in which to describe the victory of the prophet Elijah over all 450 prophets of Baal, I can summarize it by saying that it was a totally triumphant physical manifestation of the Eternal One, proving again that the God of Israel is a living God. It spotlights for us one more time, as in our Torah reading today, that we humans need physical proof in order to believe, because our ancestors prostrated themselves, filled with awe, on the ground, seeing this divine miracle. I'm also pleased that today we don't need to kill any more animals to feel and see God's presence in the world. And last but not least, our Haftarah today reminds us that we always have a chance to come back to the path of our faith and traditions when we go astray, as the people of Israel did at the end of our Haftarah reading.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim, v'ratzah b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'torah, u'v'Moshe avdo, u'v'Yisrael amo, u'v'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
First Kings, chapter 18, verses 25 to 39. I'd like to thank Rabbi Alexandra for indulging my aversion to modern biblical translations. And Elijah said unto the prophets of Baal, choose you one bullock for yourself, and dress it first, for ye are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire under. And they took the bullock, which was given them, and they dressed it, and called on the name of Baal from morning even until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, nor any that answered. And they danced and leapt upon the altar which was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them, and said, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is gone aside, or he is in a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth and must be awaked. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their manner with swords and lances, till the blood gushed out on them. And it was so, when midday was past, that they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening offering. But there was neither voice, nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. And Elijah said unto the people, come near unto me. And all the people came near unto him. And he repaired the altar of the Eternal One that was thrown down. And Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, unto whom the word of the Eternal One came, saying, Israel shall be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Eternal One. And he made a trench about the altar, as great as would contain 2 measures of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bullock in pieces, and laid it on the wood. And he said, fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the burnt offering, and on the wood. And he said, do it the second time. And they did it the second time. And he said, do it the third time. And they did it the third time. And the water ran about the altar, and he filled the trench also with water. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening offering that Elijah the prophet came near and said, Adonai, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Israel, let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word. Hear me, O Eternal One, hear me, that this people may know that thou, Adonai, art God, for thou didst turn their heart backwards. Then the fire of the Eternal One fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, Adonai hu Elohim, Adonai hu Elohim, the Eternal One is God. The Eternal One is God.
Al HaTorah, Ve'al HaAvodim, Ve'al HaNivim, Ve'al Yom HaShabbat Hazeh, Shenad Tata Lanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Likdusha Ve'limnuha, L'Kavod Ul'Tiferet, Al HaKol, Adonai Eloheinu, Anachnu Modim Lach, U'Verachim Otach, Yitbarach Shimcha, B'fi Kol Hai, Tamid Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
And I invite Jill Rosenheim, Stacey Sheldon, and Linda Pace to unmute for the prayers for the royal family, community, and Israel.
Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country, and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity.
May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel, who enter synagogues to pray and to give aid to those in need. May the Holy One, to whom all praise is due, hear their prayers and help them to fulfill their aspirations for good.
Eternal God, shelter of peace for all nations, we ask your blessing on the state of Israel and all who live there. May its leaders strive to be true to its founding principles of freedom, justice, and peace. May its citizens uphold a vision of equality and understanding, removing all fears and healing all wounds. And may we, through our loving attachment to the land, remain unprejudiced and clear in our pursuit of peace and justice. Let peace be found within her walls and safety within her borders. Vayigal kamayim mishpat utzedakah kanachal etan. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Amen.
Amen. Yehalalu et Shem Adonai ki niskav shemo levado. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in time to come, says the Eternal One. I will put my teaching within them and engrave it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall anyone need to teach a friend or a neighbor to know me, for they all shall know me, young and old alike.
Lily Montague died in January 1963. Shortly afterwards, the then Reverend John Rayner gave an address called The Next Chapter. He concluded with these words: "The freedom which liberal Judaism gives us, freedom from the shackles of obsolete doctrines and practices, is given to us only so that we may serve God all the more sincerely, joyously, and faithfully. Let us prove that our Judaism is, in Lily Montague's favourite phrase, a living Judaism. Only then will the second chapter of our history be a worthy sequel of the first." The next chapter of liturgy followed not long afterwards, with the publication of Service of the Heart in 1967. It is hard to recall now how radical, yet traditional, it was compared to its predecessor, including its fresh, modern language, although now that itself is dated by being gendered. Here is part of the introduction. This is an age of great discovery, but equally an age on the brink of chaos. As man's power over the universe increases, his need for a sense of purpose and a transcendent ideal grows more urgent. Without an awareness of God, reverence for his creation, and belief in the dignity of man, he will use his power for his own destruction. The rabbis of old said that he who saves one life saves the whole world. Similarly, he who utters one prayer with sincerity saves himself and helps to save the world from the death of the spirit. But liberal Judaism has never been about prayer and ritual alone. In 1968, my father quoted in a sermon a resolution of the ULPS rabbis which resonates with our own time. We view with dismay the government bill restricting the entry of Kenyans with a British passport. We believe such entry should remain unrestricted, but even if this fundamental principle is ignored, we unreservedly and completely uphold the view that they should be applied to all British citizens, irrespective of race, creed, or colour, and that the highest priority should be given to those citizens abroad suffering discrimination and hardship. The task of continual renewal and the continual pursuit of justice remains our task today.
"1987 saw the tragically young death of Rabbi Dr. David Goldstein, a quiet, kindly and scholarly rabbi many of us still have fond memories of him. Our fifth tranche of history takes us from then up until 2005, the date of the passing of Rabbi John Rayner, our teacher and guide, a giant figure in UK Liberal Judaism and in this synagogue. His deep belief, his sharp intellect, and his scholarly writing and preaching leave a legacy deeply imprinted in Liberal Judaism today, including on our two current prayer books, Siddur Lev Chadash, from which we've been reading this morning, which was published in 1995, and which John edited along with Rabbi Chaim Stern, and Machzor Ruach Hadashah, 2003, which was edited by Rabbis Dr. Andrew Goldstein and Charles Middleborough, with Rabbi Rayner and Professor Eric Friedland as senior consultants. In the Siddur, it is the wonderfully enlightened 53 brief sections, one for each Shabbat of the year, matching the Torah readings, which make the prayer book such a shining example of a compassionate, ethical, and campaigning Judaism. For example, in the section for this week, Ki Tissa, it's entitled Quest, and it includes some words written by the aforementioned Rabbi Dr. David Goldstein, likening the search for faith to listening to a piece of music. He said that although music will have a final climax and resolution, it is every note along the way which counts. And that, I think, really is the essence of modern liberal theology and spirituality in our time. It does not only seek an endpoint, but it marks and glorifies the journey as well. This time period saw the appointment of Rosita Rosenberg as director of the Union in 1989. The new HQ opened at the Montague Center in 1993. Rabbi Middleborough becoming director of the movement in 1998, and Rabbi Danny Rich as chief exec in 2004. And other highlights of the period include the publication in 1992 of the important affirmations of Liberal Judaism, and a gender-inclusive Haggadah in 1996. There were many new congregations in those years, including Beit Klal Yisrael, Herefordshire, Lincolnshire, Eastbourne. Edinburgh joined LJ in 2004, and Suffolk began in 2005. In 2002, the Kehillah North London, successor to North London Progressive Synagogue. The old synagogue had just closed, and the Kehillah took its place. In those days, social action was a highlight of Liberal Judaism. There was the Jubilee 2000 campaign, and there were many projects to help homeless people, including the drop-in centre at North London Progressive Synagogue. I had the privilege of being their last rabbi, and this brief survey of that period is dedicated to the memory of that community.
I always take Rabbi Wright very seriously at her word when she said 3 minutes. Rabbi Dr. John Rayner, Zichrono Livracha, wrote in an article on progressive Judaism and Jewish unity that unity in diversity That is the only kind of unity worth having, and it's certainly the only kind that is realistically attainable. As we begin today, this year of celebrating the last 120 years of liberal Judaism, we must always look forward and commit ourselves to the next 120 years. Liberal Judaism was a necessary addition to the Jewish world, providing a home for so many Jewish stories. Over the years, our necessity has only grown and become more evident. As we look forward, I'm excited to plan for the new stories we will tell, of the new liturgies and rituals we will embrace, our continued commitment to a relevant and inspired religious experience, grounded in deep Jewish tradition and learning, for the voices we will lift up to ensure that the prophetic calls of justice are heard, for the Jews we will open doors for the Judaism we will learn, experience, and share. But today, more than any other day, I'm excited to be part of a movement that is unified by our diversity. Here at the LJS, we bring together so many different voices, each of our communities unique with something to offer, and yet united by being part of this movement. Over the last 2 years especially, we have learned even more so how much we need each other and how much stronger we are when we collaborate. The next 120 years will no doubt bring its own challenges and will bring changes we cannot even imagine today. However, our commitment to a multiplicity of voices being heard, to the beauty of being able to disagree well, to the creativity of shared leadership, will, I have no doubt, give us the strength to face the future with a courage and a hope. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and we will strengthen one another.
And as we come to a special prayer of thanksgiving for this moment, let me invite you to stand. Eternal God, as we celebrate 120 years since the founding of liberal Judaism in this country, we give thanks for the vision and achievement of its founders, for the spiritual possibilities of a Judaism that captured the loyalty and imagination of its leaders and members. We express our gratitude to all those who developed a dynamic and forward-thinking movement, and to the people who have contributed to the establishment and life of its 39 communities in this country and abroad. From its beginnings, liberal Judaism has inspired a religious consciousness combined with a commitment to social justice. Although its members witnessed the catastrophic events of the 20th century, that vision never diminished, but was strengthened by a strong sense of social responsibility. May we never lose our faith in the mystery of our spiritual heritage, and pledge ourselves at this special service to become partners with God in building a world that is based on love and kindness, justice, compassion, and truth. Kein Yehi Ratzon, v'nomar, Amen.
We remain standing for the conclusion of the service on page 519. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen. Baruch Adonai Elohim, Elohei Yisrael, עושה נפלאות לבדו, וברוך שם כבודו לעולם. ימלא כבודו את כל הארץ, אמן ואמן. והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. יהי חסדך אדוני עלינו, כאשר ייחלנו לך. כל גויים אשר עשית יבואו וישתחוו לפניך, אדוני, ויכבדו לשמך. ברוך אדוני ביום, ברוך אדוני בלילה, ברוך אדוני בשוכבנו, ברוך אדוני בקומנו. אבינו שבשמיים, יחד שמך וקיים מלכותך תמיד, ומלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. Life is finite, like a candle. It burns, it glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty. Then it fades. Its substance is consumed, and it is no more. Yet we do not despair, for we know that we are more than a flickering flame. With our lives we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and light, of death and life. As in our hearts we name our loved ones, we pray that the divine presence will comfort us and all who mourn. Today we especially remember from a number of communities from Bristol West, Neville Lewison, Anna Pasmaster, Burnford Crawford, and we mourn the recent death of Rini Emmett and Betty Steinland. From Kingston Liberal, Max Feldman. From the LJS, Bronya Bennett, Ann Curtis, Howard Crawford, Gwenty Cannon, Easy Geiger, Sheila Gottlieb, Eric Glade, Violet Nathan, Ron Newbury, Gretel Pordes, Esther Posner, Caroline Sharpstone Geller, Eve Sloman, Emil Stern, and we mourn the recent death of Michael Ross Levine and Ernesto Moose. From the Liberal Synagogue Elstree, Stella Amswich. From Mosaic Liberal, Alex Goldberg, Walter Henry, Sidney Rose, Jeanette Rubenstein, Pearl Seidman. From Southgate Progressive, Michelle Dobrin, Helen Newman, Trudy Rowlands, Maurice King, Beatrice Rose, Maurice Stern. And we also remember us rabbis, educators, youth workers, and community leaders of Liberal Judaism who are no longer in our midst. Zichronam livracha, may the memory be for a blessing. And let us praise God's name with the words of the mourner's Kaddish. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועלמא דברה חירותה וימליך מלכותה, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן, יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעולמי עולמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן, יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל בני אדם, ואמרו אמן.
First of all, I just would like to echo Rabbi Igor's welcome to all of you here in the sanctuary, watching on Zoom, on YouTube, and on Facebook from around the country and abroad. to this very special 120th service. It's wonderful to see people with us here in the sanctuary, and a huge heartfelt thank you to all my colleagues and members of different communities who've taken part in the service today. Thank you so much. Thank you as well to our lovely choir under the baton of Kathy Heller-Jones, with Martin Sanders-Hewitt at the piano. And a thank you to my colleague, Rabbi Igor Zinkov, without whose presence and brilliance, I don't think we would have been able to conduct this service in the way that we have today. So thank you to all of you. We just have a few announcements. One is to look ahead to another grand Liberal Judaism celebration, the Day of Celebration, on the 22nd of May, a Sunday, which will be held here, but will also be in a hybrid way. So people a little bit further afield who can't travel to London will also be able to participate. And the title, Where Liberal and Judaism Meet, will help to develop some of the themes which you've heard today. I take a little bit of prerogative here to invite all of you to join us on March the 1st for the next in our series of 6 lectures by Rabbi Dr. Michael Hilton, who you heard from a little earlier, and Dr. Harith Ramli, Judaism and Islam, A Shared History. And the next session is on the 1st of March. It will be held in a hybrid way, both here, but you can also apply to the LJS to get a Zoom link, education@ljs.org. After Kiddush, to which all of you in the sanctuary are invited in our Montefiore Hall, if you feel comfortable joining us, there is an outdoor space as well where you can also socialize and meet with people, and there will be also a Zoom Kiddush, which will be led by our colleague, Rabbi Mark Solomon. So those of you who are on Zoom, YouTube, or Facebook, the link for those on Facebook and YouTube will come up at the end of the service. Please do join Rabbi Mark Solomon and other members who are on Zoom of liberal communities for a Kiddush. After that Kiddush, Rabbi Igor and myself invite you, together with our guests here from the Jesuit Young Adult Ministries, for a question and answer and a tour of the synagogue, especially to see our extraordinary sculpture, Shoah sculpture by Anish Kapoor, which is in the main foyer. So a final thank you to all of you who've participated in the service today, and to refer those of you from other communities to your newsletters and websites for future events that are taking place. And we conclude our service with Adon Olam on page 525.
Please rise. And after that rousing conclusion, on behalf of Liberal Judaism, I would like to thank the Liberal Jewish Synagogue for hosting this service, for Rabbis Wright and Zinkoff for putting it together, a complicated process, but it's all come off brilliantly, and I'm sure has united many congregations within our movement on this Shabbat morning. I was asked to give a final blessing, and I chose to repeat the final words of a sermon given by Israel Abrahams at the last service of the first year of the Jewish Religious Union, the JRU. And he wrote, "Let these assemblages strengthen your moral fibre, redouble your loyalty to Judaism, kindle a new confidence in its power to save you and your power to save it." I hope that this service has had this effect on you and on our movement as it celebrates our 120th year. Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo ve'et kol ha'amim b'shalom. Eternal God, grant strength to your people. Eternal God, bless your people and all peoples with peace. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.